What's good? It's Fever. Today I'll go over the combat between Black Desert Online versus Blade and Soul. Both games are highly praised for having top tier action combats, and it's one of the main draws of both games, and it really couldn't be more true. But funny enough, this is a perfect example of a game's context heavily dictating the actual system, and we're talking about combat here. And much like both of these titles, they end up appealing to completely different people. Now, in a sentence, the difference between Black Desert and Blade and Soul's combat is that Black Desert focuses more on RPG fundamentals, while Blade and Soul focuses on raw mechanical skill. And I do want to add that there is overlap. I am in no way saying that skill isn't required for Black Desert and that there are no RPG elements in Blade and Soul. This is just a sentence to help build a framework going forward. So the similarities between the systems coincide with what people would expect from action combat. You attack independently from having a tabbed target, and you must hit enemies with your skills, and this usually requires some form of aiming, and your attacks and your weapons and your spells or whatever, they'll have hitboxes that must actually hit your opponent's hitbox. You can move, you can dodge, you can avoid incoming attacks and damage, but most importantly, and I'd love to talk about this in more depth sometime else, but the animations are important. So are things like countering or blocking or movement or invulnerability frames, and I think you get it, they both have pretty much true action combat systems. The games handle abilities deceptively similarly. Black Desert's abilities are put behind combination key presses of attack buttons, normally with movement or modifiers, so if you're holding forward and you attack, it's a forward slash, and if you hold left and attack, it's a mobile slash moving to the left. Blade and Soul has condition-based abilities. Pressing tab when you're in a neutral position might activate an ability where you swap places with an enemy, or if you're knocked down, pressing tab might recover and bring you to your feet. In addition to this, both games also push different abilities into combos, so pressing the same key to kick 3 times in a row may result in 3 different types of kicks in Black Desert, whereas hitting somebody with a specific attack may unlock a condition that allows you to use a different ability in Blade and Soul. The act of comboing abilities together, linking crowd control, managing cooldowns and resources, it's the same in both games. Both systems really just boil down to clever ways of hiding large amount of keybinds that feel intuitive and offer player control as they fight without overwhelming the player with options. Both games stay away from the holy trinity of tank, damage dealer, and healer, but then the game either kicks in around the combat system or it doesn't. Black Desert allows the game around the combat to influence a lot, and Blade and Soul really doesn't. For instance, in Black Desert, your skill build is semi-permanent. There is an expensive item that requires like a week of playing, or you can spend, I think it's close to $10 in the cash shop to alter your skill build, while in Blade and Soul, you are free to change your build at any time, and in instanced PvP, you can even see the class you're up against and can tailor your build accordingly. And in both games, there is a lot of variation to potential builds, and skill builds can completely impact the outcome of a fight. So think Path of Exile or Diablo 2 versus D3, where there's weight in building your character versus you can just modify it at any time. Balance is also handled completely differently. In Blade and Soul, which has a very large esports scene overseas that revolves around 1v1 dueling, the game has been designed so that every class has a fair shot at any other class if they're played at a similar skill level or slightly lower skill if you play a destroyer. Black Desert has different classes having different strengths and weaknesses. So for instance, the Wizard, or the typical spell-flinging class in Black Desert, he can throw out these incredibly destructive, blatantly overpowered spells that if left alone, he can get close to one-shotting people in an AoE if his gear allows, but if a ninja class gets on him, he doesn't really stand a chance. It's not even a case of rock, paper, scissors, it's just under different context, different classes have strengths and weaknesses, at least if skill is all the same. In Black Desert, your gear is very difficult and time-consuming to power up, and each threshold of power holds a ton of weight. So much so that a player with heavily upgraded gear can drool and still probably take on 3 players his same level with half his gear, or he won't need to avoid monster damage that he outgears. In Blade and Soul, Arena, which is the primary PvP focus of the game, at least in North America, will normalize your gear so the amount of time that you have played prior to that match doesn't impact gameplay at all. You and your opponent are on complete even ground. And in PvE, gear is more nuanced, where selection is more about choosing which and what stats you want. And while there is a power creep, there is a bit of an item gear treadmill, a lot of the content, like the solo Mushin Tower, is designed not as DPS checks, but mechanic checks pertaining to your class and the skill of utilizing that class and all of its abilities fully. Enemy AI is a huge issue. Black Desert seemingly doesn't have enemy AI, so in a lot of ways the combat can feel very Dynasty Warrior, where monsters are just kind of like running into your sword, whereas in Blade and Soul there is normal AI, which is a large step up, and they also use the aspects of action type combat, things like the blocking or the countering, and so you are required to play against them in a way where you are constantly utilizing much of your ability toolkit, your CC chains, your dodging, out of necessity for even killing the stuff. This results in Black Desert feeling incredibly easy when playing against monsters unless you artificially make it harder by fighting things over your gear or your level, or just by fighting a lot of stuff. And Blade and Soul can feel tedious needing to constantly chain CCs and land 0.5 second projectile counterattacks when you're just like grinding trash mobs. To really tie everything together really nicely, Blade and Soul's combat feels strategic. It feels tactical. You are making deliberate moves all the time, and screwing up is what gets you killed. When you die, the thing that you think about is, what did I do wrong? What can I do better next time? Skill overcomes almost everything, and the game is designed around that, and it really does feel like a fighting game from an MMO viewpoint, where the small things and the twitch reflexes and the superior game knowledge are greatly rewarded. Black Desert, on the other hand, can come off really hack and slashy. When you die, you think, man, I'm not fucking geared for this. And this is because gear can replace skill. A good skill build will get you further than knowing how to animation cancel, but that said, in PvP, if you do meet someone who is at a similar level or equivalent gearing, you can see that there is depth, there are tactics, there is strategy, it's just outshined by all the other stuff in the game. So the smaller things aren't as rewarded. I mean, you can still kill someone at a higher level or someone with better gear than you by just being better than them, but how much better than them you have to be is based on that disparity. That said, the small stuff, or just being good at the game, while it's not needed, it does increase efficiency. And if you know Black Desert, efficiency, killing monsters efficiently, grinding efficiently, killing enemies efficiently, is very important in terms of the rest of the game. So anyway, I mean, for me, if I want to prove I'm better than someone, if I want to have a lot of pride in my ability to play a game, then Blade and Soul is vastly superior. But if I want to play a game where I just somehow always end up killing everything on my screen because combat is fun, it doesn't feel like a chore, and graphically it looks pretty damn good, I'd go with Black Desert. And just like I said in the beginning, the combat itself is very, very similar, but the game around it makes it appeal to completely different people.